Welcome to this episode of Athletic Training Chat. We are on with Beth Shoulders today, who is at Spalding University as an assistant professor and the clinical coordinator, in addition to going back and working on her doctoral degree, in addition to lots of service positions that she's held, in addition to working PRN on top of all the other experiences that she has had in her clinical time. And that's ultimately what we talk about today, is balancing all the things that she has done and is doing and tying those together, and how that allows her to be both a better educator but also a better clinician, and how they kind of feed into everything with that. And it's really just a good reminder that we can't really be one thing or the other when it comes to the athletic training profession. It is kind of a culmination of all of those, where then some of us, depending on your role, specialize in different areas, but we can't always just bypass the rest of them. It's important to keep all of those at heart and really at the core of what we do. If you're having a hard time filling a role or just need some extra backup when it comes to staffing, and don't we all, check out Wave On Health. It isn't another physical person in your space, but they might have a solution for you when it comes to trying to figure out how to provide the access to advice and the different aspects that we provide as a profession to the patients that you serve. So check out Wave On Health. Let them know you heard about it from the AT Chat podcast. They may have a solution for you to try and provide that top quality of care to your athletic or patient population. As always, we are powered by Mueller Sports Medicine. NATA is coming up. Make sure you check them out as you get there. A few months away, but they will undoubtedly have something there to check out that you haven't seen before, or that could really be a game changer. So please check out Mueller Sports Medicine for all your sports medicine needs. But without further ado, please enjoy this episode. Well, welcome to this episode of Athletic Training Chat. We are on with Beth Shoulders, and we are talking about all things clinical and educating and working on a PhD, and pretty much just how Beth is really busy and has a lot going on, but how that all ties together in a really great way. We happen to connect by the wonderful world of social media. I think maybe you followed the podcast and I reached out, and we just were like, hey, this sounds like a good topic. Let's go. And couple reschedules as is normal, but here we are. But before we get into some of the questions around the main topic, I just wanted to turn it over to you to fill in kind of your background and how you got to where you are.
So my background and intro are all kind of all together. So if we lump them together, it's fine. I've always known I wanted to be healthcare from high school on. So that bit of time in college always was focusing on those items. I switched between nursing, athletic training, physical therapy, I think maybe pharmacy once the whole time. It actually took until I was working in a hospital, realized that nursing was not going to be for me. Had my CNA, was like, nope, this is not for me. Switched routes, started the PT route. As I was starting the PT classes, program director at the time at Spalding, the inaugural program director, came to U of L and was speaking to the Human Health Performance Club about the new program at Spalding for athletic training. And I'm like, that's it. That's what I'm doing. Like, I always liked sports. I always wanted to be an athletic trainer. Well, not really an athletic. I always want to be an athletic trainer, but in the back of my mind, we did not have one at my high school at the time.
Sure.
So I was like, okay, this is it. So I had to finish, I think the rest of that year and another year, because I was still working on my bachelor's at the time. I was accepted into the second cohort at Spalding. Went through Spalding's 2-year master program, inaugural program in the state. So first professional program in the state. And now I'm actually back as the coordinator of clinical education at Spalding, an assistant professor. Started this position in July of 23. being that I have a bunch going on, I decided at the same time, and well, I guess right after I started to apply, was accepted to 2 different PhD programs, and ultimately have accepted in my second semester of the PhD for health professions education right down the street at our another university, Bellarmine University. So on top of full-time coordinator of clinical education, PhD student full-time, I'm also PRN for 2 different companies to do some secondary coverage and as needed coverage on the sideline.
So that was ultimately the first question I had for you. Being someone myself that likes to have a lot of irons in the fire, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, TBD, but balancing all of that, how? Any recommendations?
Well, and then to add more irons to that fire, I guess gonna have to dive a little bit into this. Didn't think I would end up in the collegiate level in academia at all for
Sure.
athletic training. So when I started at the high school I was at, I started there in June of 17, or July of 17, right after graduating from Spalding. It was kind of like my high school, a 6A school here, so one of the biggest high schools in the state. Felt like home, went right in, and as soon as I went in, like month in, like so school barely starts. Hey, do you want to sub? Do you want to sub? I'm like, guys, I need to get settled as an athletic trainer first.
Sure.
So then I started subbing for them, and they're like, well, we really want to add to our academy pathway and add sports medicine. I'm like, okay. So I started doing all that process, and for Kentucky, you have to be in your profession for 4 years before that you can be a career technical teacher. They would not count my years as a CNA, so I've been in healthcare since 2011.
Okay.
They would not count those years. They were not quality years according to them. So I finish up my 4 years that I needed. Prior to then, I started as a long-term sub in what would ultimately be my classes. Started that process. We had a new principal. She kept everything going. Applied. They hired me. The state of Kentucky came back and said, your master's in athletic training is not enough a degree to teach secondary high school sports medicine.
Interesting.
They said because you can't teach everything in healthcare to the high school, you can't teach what you need to teach. Basically, they were like, you have to be a nurse in order to teach all of this. And I'm like, well, why? Our practice act could change during this time, showed them that. They're like, no, basically, you still have to be a nurse. Like, but you can put a portfolio together, get certified in health and PE, and then for a short amount of time, we'll give you specialized credentialing to teach the sports medicine classes, but they're going away because really high school kids that when they graduate, they can't go straight into the workforce for athletic training. So we're going to be getting rid of that within our curriculum for high school anyways. So right as all of that's transpiring, the Region 2 rep for Kentucky reached out to me and was like, hey, I'm getting ready to move out of Kentucky. We need a new rep for cats. Do you want to do it? I'm like, well, sure. My life just got a whole lot easier because I'm not doing this position. So I took that on. That summer we went to Europe. I still went as a chaperone with the high school I was with. Right when we got back from Europe, they had filled my position, but one of the other teachers in the pathway had left. So I actually started that other school year as another long-term sub. So 3 years long-term sub in the position that I quote unquote could not teach. That put me to last year around this time, found out the coordinator of clinical education at Spalding was leaving. So I'm like, might as well apply. Then the same Region 2 rep that we had for Kentucky was also our AT Cares chair for Kentucky. Well, I took it upon myself to get the training. So I've now got that training for AT Cares. I'm now the Kentucky AT Cares rep for CETA. And that's all led me to here. So on top of also being Quiz Bowl on CETA committee member for Kentucky, back to your initial question of how, I'm going to assume for the being that 3 years ago, well, from the 20 to 21 school year until last July, I basically worked two full-time jobs and never really slept or stopped. So I think that's how I've just always been busy and needing to stay busy. And that's how.
Wow, it's impressive, and I also enjoy on the story just like nothing. It doesn't seem like anything was truly planned. Like here's
No.
an opportunity. Hey,
Yeah.
let's give it a shot. Let's see what it goes. Oh, by the way, another one popped up, and
Yeah.
really kind of seizing on that.
Well,
And even like you said with your application to the job at Spalding, of just being like, yeah, why not? We'll see what happens, and here we are.
well, and that's the funny thing. I was actually in communication just the other week or so ago with a student that graduated from Spalding last year. Just knew me from being a preceptor as well for Spalding. He was never a student with me, but he was determined to be sideline, baseball, all the main sports, and now he's doing more of sales and doing PRN coverage for gymnastics of all things. And he was like, if you'd have told me a year ago I was going to do gymnastics, I'd have looked at you and laughed. I said, if you'd have told me 6 years ago I'd be coordinator of clinical education, I would have laughed.
For sure. For sure.
So,
I feel the same way about research. If you would have told me when I was younger that it'd be something I'd be interested in wanting to be actively a part of, I would have laughed at you. I'd have been like, no, not a
yeah.
chance.
Uh,
Now I kick myself because I wish I would have learned a bunch of stuff that I'm trying to figure out now.
well, that's where I stand now. I'm like, all of these thoughts in here with our faculty, we're talking. I'm like, oh, that'd be a good research topic. I'm like, focus, focus. You have to worry about getting through your PhD and your actual dissertation before you can work on big group uh,
Right. Right.
research stuff. So,
I understand that. One of the things that were big topics we were going to talk about is, your work, your PRN work, and how that is important to you to tie into your role in education, and obviously being uh, the clinical education coordinator, and tying all that in. Um, why is that so important to you, to maintain that PRN and do those things um, in your role?
I really don't know if it's necessarily for my role or for it's my own personal benefit.
Sure.
Um, Obviously, you could talk to every coordinator of clinical education throughout the nation, and we're all going to give you a different work speaking aspect, just like all faculty members. But for me personally, if I'm going to be teaching our next generation of athletic trainers, I want to still remember what it's like to be on the sideline. I think part of that is like that keeping the skills up.
Yep.
And for me to do so, I feel like I need to be on the sideline to do that. Um, but at the same time, it's like I don't have to be. I mean, I know the skills, I can read them and all of that, but we're a hands-on profession. I think that's the best thing now. Right now, I've got a lot of irons in the fire, obviously, and doing a whole bunch of things. And um, being single helps, not having to worry about a family to go home to right now. Eventually that could change. But just keeping those skills up, and that's why I think so, and being in the know with the preceptors and helping understand like, hey, letting the students know we're a small community. Athletic training is small, and I think that's just the big correlate for me.
You mentioned keeping your skills up, and having that hands-on experience. Benefits that you've seen in, your teaching, or even just in um, finding, clinical experiences with your students.
Uh, the main thing for that would be we're now in a generation of teaching in the higher education of we're coming into the COVID times where they're reaching the master's level after having those years of just being virtual all the time. So, needing to teach that, basically reteach how to be a human and interact in healthcare. And a lot of them do better by hearing experiences versus sitting and listening to a lecture. Funny enough, our students are all like, we don't want to be lectured at. We don't want PowerPoints. We want fun, like simulation type items. I'm like, okay, we'll work that out. So they've had until they actually are in that position, we have one instructor that's very much a no PowerPoint, like straight give you the facts, talk about it, discuss case studies. And then they're like, oh gosh, we don't like that. We're like, well, that's what you've told us you like. So just having to be flexible in that aspect of well of like how to actually teach the skills that the students will understand. And I'm that athletic trainer that I always ask this athlete, hey, that's cool. Can I take a picture of it?
Sure.
And I have, there's nothing that can signify who this athlete is. And showing that to students helps too, of like, hey, here you go. Or I've got one pretty vivid memory for me. I've had two students with me, a second-year student and a first-year student at the time. And athlete was on the field screaming for me. We get out there and I notice finger was definitely broke. Ended up being in multiple spots, having to have all of that. I turned and I looked at the two students. Hey, who wants to splint this? Both bug-eyed, huge. The first year was
Sure.
like, no, let the second year do it. And the second year's like, no, I don't want to do it. So I splinted it. We walked off the field. It was softball field. And I'm like, guys, why? Like, first year, I'm like, I understand you're probably culture shocked to what's going on.
Yep.
And the second year, I was like, why? Like, just curious, like, why? Well, I mean, in class when we splinted stuff, it's all been normal. Like, I didn't have to worry about splint as it lies. I'm like, okay. I was like, let me give you one. Do you know when the first time I've had to splint a how it lies bone? Just then I said, exactly. I said, you don't always get that opportunity in clinical. You all have had a great one. So just remember that of like how to move forward. And I think that was real eye-opening. And I try to tell that to all of the students now of like, hey, if you get something and your preceptor's like, do you want to do this? Absolutely. They're not going to let you hurt the athlete more.
Yeah, I just had something like that the other day. I've got a student with me. I work in a orthopedic clinic with a surgeon, and within this last 2 weeks, we had two people that ruptured their proximal biceps. And me working in the
Yeah.
collegiate setting for most of my career had never seen that. And
Yeah.
then I got into clinic, and now you learn that's just a thing. If it happens, it happens. Great,
Yeah.
it's done. Like that's actually a procedure that they do,
Right.
which again, was learning for me, but it was just mind blowing
Yeah.
the student because it just unless you have those stories or experiences like you said, and even our surgeon says this to patients all the time, John Elway and Brett Favre both
Right.
did it either because they just happened to or because of a surgery, and obviously they were able to continue to have very good careers. Like we'll say that to patients all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, the importance of being able to tie those things together and not make it as wow the first time it occurs.
Right. And that's what I keep trying to tell them of like, take these experiences that you get. Like, yeah, we require a certain amount of hours for minimums, but I promise you, the time you're not there is when something's going to happen. And then I give them the experience when I was a student. My preceptor wasn't even at it. It was an away wrestling event. I get a text. Look what we missed today. It was a true knee dislocation,
Oh wow.
fractured off. And I was like, was you there? And she goes, oh no, I wasn't there either. So we both missed it. So it never fails. And that's what we're doing.
Do you find and any other things that you come up to mind, with your PRN stuff, does it help you seemingly keep up more with the changes that are constantly happening within just medicine and the profession in general, evaluation techniques, care techniques, treatment rehab, maybe not as easy in the PRN role because it may not be as long term in terms of seeing things, but have you found that that's helped you kind of stay up to date more, or is there other things that have helped complement that to make
So
it easier?
being that I'm so fresh off a sideline, I've not even, been away from sideline a full year.
True.
Uh, as of right now, I want to say no, just keeping up with the times, which is what we're doing in clinical practice.
Yep.
Now, 4 or 5 years maybe down the road, yeah, I can see it where it would be one of those helping keep me up on a date because we all know we never know what's going to come up next of what we can do addition
Right.
to. I don't ever see us anything taken away from what we do, but what could be next. And I see that that'll be a positive influence of helping with that. And then not only that, but like sometimes it gives the opportunities for students as well. So we see in December, I covered a cross country junior world Olympics. I think is what it was, junior Olympics, something
Sure.
cross country. And any of those, I guess you would call them unique, not always seen activities that are coverage opportunities, I always give the option to students to go with me. Just as something that they may not always see of like if they're interested in cross country, they may want to go with me for that. And then next month I'm covering some gymnastics stuff. I just have to verify with the boss of that PRN organization that, hey, if students want to come with me, is that cool? I never want to overstep any of that, but let the students know that if they want to see me on sideline, then they can see that because little do they know we're all a little different in our element of whether that's clinic, sideline, classroom, and so on.
Absolutely. You mentioned second semester of your PhD, so kind of just getting started, if you will, in what seems like a never-ending process, from my experience. What brought you about pursuing your PhD? I know one thing you had mentioned, you didn't really expect to ever see yourself in education, but within the collegiate level, and here you are, and now going on to that next. And then kind of an addition to that, how is that complementing everything you're already doing in your roles?
So Spalding until this year, we are changing to semesters. Spalding is in session, so that's their real selling point for undergrad is blocks, 6 weeks on, a week off, of courses. So in doing so, for some reason, for as long as it's been, their graduation happens the first weekend in June, come back 2 more weeks for class until you officially graduate.
Oh,
So we don't understand.
it seems interesting, but
Yeah.
yes.
The only thing we can think of is that 2 week mark puts it at Father's Day weekend, but also in the Kentucky, specifically Louisville area, all of the universities on semesters finish that first week or last week of April, which means the first week of May is when they're done. But being that's Derby, there's no graduation, so that makes them graduating on Mother's Day weekend. So I don't understand if maybe it's that Father's Day thing, but I'm like, everybody around here graduates on Mother's Day weekend because of Derby. So anyway, back on that. So like I said, we graduated. We were at my graduation get together dinner after, and my dad's telling everybody, yep, she's getting her doctorate. She's getting her doctorate. And I'm like, Dad, first of all, just not even fully finished with my master's yet. Not even fully settled in a job. I was like, we as athletic trainers don't necessarily get in this for the pay. So that's a whole nother hurdle to cover. And I am a first generation college student. So, but apparently, I guess it's just been fate. Dad's wanted me to get one all along. Never really had a reason to get a doctorate at all. Then when I applied at Spalding, went through the interview process, just talking to the interview committee of like, why do they have the degrees they do, and just hearing the breakdown. And then I knew at that point that I didn't want a DAT just because I didn't want to stay on the research of athletic training side being in education.
Sure.
So I wanted to look more at that, and being that I'm already been in the crazy life anyways, I didn't want to wait another year to start the EDD at Spalding. And actually my program director was in the first cohort of Bellarmine's PhD in for health professions education. So talked to her, found out about that. And that's what ultimately led me to Bellarmine and their PhD. Prior to being accepted to Bellarmine, I was accepted to another university. I can't even remember what that PhD was going to be in, but I was like, yeah, looking at the two, comparing them, I'm like, I think Bellarmine's going to be a better fit just because of what the actual health profession education is and learning things specific to healthcare and education.
Awesome.
And obviously, in order to get tenure at a university, you have to have a terminal degree, and that
Yeah,
plays a big role. And now that I'm in education and academia, who knows, I may end up wanting to be a program director someday. And a Katie standards does require program directors to be doctorally trained.
absolutely. Yeah, it can definitely open up a lot of doors in that regard. Anything around kind of combining this educational job plus the PRN, and kind of all the other, even your service stuff that you have done and are doing that we haven't covered that you would like to hit on?
Um, oh, adding more fuel to the fire. I get to be appointed treasurer of our state association starting at the annual meeting, because our treasurer is going on to be the CETA treasurer. So they are like, oh yeah, we're gonna appoint you, or the president was. I'm like, oh, okay.
I've done
Well,
that one. Thankfully, we use an association management, which makes my life super easy. So hopefully you've got a little bit of help there.
um,
Or are you going
the
to be cutting checks and doing the whole bit?
well, so talking to the current treasurer, there's some things that have changed with the banking institution that we use. He's
Okay.
just not fully made the cut to change to that stuff yet. And he's like, plus I know I'm going out. He goes, you can make the changes. So I'm like, okay. So we're gonna do a lot more of like online bill pay probably, and make it
Gotcha.
a little bit
Gotcha.
easier. And um I always can reach out to him if I have questions. Our um one of our first treasurers for the state association is still active, but he's no longer a board member. He's on the state licensure board, so he can't do both.
Got
So
it.
I can reach out to them. So I have a lot of supports of that. And my sister is a business major and works in a bank. So, you know,
Helpful.
worst case scenario, hey, double check my work on this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, so just always doing something. And I think for me, just needing to be able to go back to, I guess, my roots of seeing the sideline and remembering why we all get into athletic training to begin with, um, is part of the reason to keep up the PRN. And just me and my mindset of I want to be able to keep my skills up to show stuff to the students, especially on the clinical education side when I know what they're going through. And that way I can understand, and I want them to come back and tell me as much stuff as they learn as well from their preceptors to help us become better educators for them.
Awesome. Well, with that, ready to jump into the AT chat questions?
All right, I guess so.
So I'm just from all of the lenses that you view the profession, I'm curious to your answer on this first one is where do you see athletic training going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, uh nowhere but up. I mean, we're fighting battle. We all know this within athletic training. We've got some hurdles that we've overcame. We've got a whole lot more hurdles to overcome. I think the uh, big thing of trying to figure out how we're going to do this without um, being a burden also to our athletes is figuring out how to bill and get reimbursed nationwide, where it's not just a state by state thing, because each state obviously has some different regulatory bodies, but
Mhm.
definitely that kind of aspect. And just like I mentioned earlier, what else are we going to be able to do that we're not currently able to do? What's the next big thing for us as athletic trainers? It's nice to kind of know well, eventually we'll know some of Katie's thoughts and new things that they're working with within BOC as well, for new standards to teach to students, and how we're going to change on that. And then the big one that I see is that, we're in this AI chat GBT telehealth world of, we're one of the few that really is not going to be a problem for us, because we have to be hands-on. Like you can't do you can't do sideline athletic training telehealth. Yeah, we can talk to you on the phone, or video, however, we can talk you through a rehab and watch you, but fully hands-on getting our clinical diagnosis before sending on for that MRI, CT, or whatever. We can't do that on a televisit. So I think that's a positive for us, is that we are a selling point, I should say, is like we're primarily going to always be hands-on. We're not going to have many telehealth options.
I would agree with you there. Absolutely. What advice would you go back and give yourself as a young athletic trainer, and if you could set kind of when that would be?
Well, you'll miss injuries, and it's okay to miss injuries.
Done
There
there.
was actually on the secondary school Facebook page earlier today, the big nationwide one, or maybe it was last night. I don't know what the algorithms. I've seen it the last 24 hours. Let's put it like
Sure,
that.
sure.
Somebody was posting anonymously of, hey, not a new grad, I'm 8 years certified, but I missed this and it's real confidence booster. Like, what do you all do? Well, I always lead all of my clinical diagnosis to kids and parents of, I don't have x-ray vision, I don't have MRI vision, I don't have CT vision. If I did, I would be making a whole lot more money and I wouldn't be here. This is what I think it is.
Yep.
You can't know without knowing this stuff. So my professional opinion is you need to go to a doctor to see this. I can help facilitate that. And always remember to CYA. And my big thing is, I tell this to future athletic trainers, and I remember this from my time as well as being fresh out there. Before I do anything, I kind of quickly run through my mind of how is an attorney going to tear me up on the witness stand because I did XYZ. As long as I can have my practice act back me up, Katie standards backing me up, and I did what I'm supposed to do, and I know an expert witness is going to agree with that, then I know what I've done is correct.
Agreed. I like your approach on, I've said those same things. I'd be making a lot more money and probably wouldn't be sitting here right now, or probably retired. But
Right.
yeah, the same thing. Even if I'm 99% sure that they tore their ACL, it's not necessarily coming out saying you tore your ACL. This is my concern. Here are the reasons why.
Yep.
We won't obviously know until we get it confirmed, but here's where it's leading. So sounds bad, but I think you kind of hedge your bets both ways, because if you're wrong, hey, great news, you didn't tear your ACL, but you had all your rationale for why. And if they did, you were right on course for it. And so it was never speaking in those definitives, just because you're always going to be surprised almost no matter what with injuries, especially with imaging, because you just never know what's going to come up on those, whether it was part of your exam or not. So I agree and really like that approach.
And the other thing is I try to tell them, and I even did it myself as a young athletic trainer, keep your textbooks, the big important ones that the program directors tell you, keep them. Program directors, coordinated clinical education faculty, whoever, keep them, refer back to them. It is okay. It is perfectly okay to say, I'm not sure, I'm going to get my book. And sometimes you fake it till you make it, till a kid walks out. Say, hey, I'll give, especially high school. Let me phrase that. Fake it till you make it. Hey, let me get back to you. I'm going to do the XYZ. And I've even had to use my books to show athletes something that they didn't understand. And that's a funny one that I'll keep away from the podcast and save it for when I write a book one day of, you can't make this up. This is what was said to me.
For sure. For sure.
So,
what has been the most influential resource you found in your career?
Mentors, whether
Common
that
one.
is,
For good reason.
I feel like everybody has to say that, but you've just got to find who that is for you and accept it. And sometimes, as silly as it sounds, your mentor could be a certified that's not been as certified as long as you, because they may know and can help you as well. I know mine personally was a preceptor that I had my full immersion, and I would always, we've actually became really close, and we have game night and a whole bunch of other stuff all the time.
Nice.
But don't be afraid to find a mentor and don't be afraid to ever ask something of your mentors. Preceptors is most likely who they're going to be. But I mean, I've even had a student that I had a year or 2 years ago, recently certified, been certified just the last year, and she knew that I had a new position, and she texts me quite often, "Hey, are you busy? Hey, are you busy? Like, just want to talk through this." And I'm like, "Okay, let's talk through it." I'm like, you've done nothing wrong. Everything's right. Like, you've not done anything different, or would you have done different? And most recently, she sent me a text for needing another reference for a different job because she was looking to already change. And I said, "Can I just be nosy and ask why?" And in less than 6 months, she realized that where she was not where she was meant to be, and she was not enjoying it like she knew it to. So she knew it was time to change.
It's a lot of self-awareness to know that.
It is. And that's what I told her.
Instead
I said that's the best answer I've ever heard of needing a job reference.
For sure. Also very curious on this one. Just because you got a couple things going on. As an AT in your role, how do you take care of yourself?
I've been doing the best that I can on my work schedule because now I'm very much I didn't realize how much of a digital calendar person I was until it was not filled with practices and games, and
Sure.
I had this free time that I could do anything with. So I've started adding like, "Hey, you're gonna study now. Hey, you have a date this day. Hey, you're going to game night. Hey, you're going to brunch." Putting that stuff on there to do that, and then kind of let myself slack off for a little bit in the workout department because I was like, "Oh, I used to get up at 4:30 in the morning and then go until 11 at night. I can sleep now until 5 and wake up." And that snooze button just became real easy to push. But
I hear that.
I've started changing that and start my mornings off again, working out, and that's helped. And just that, and then actually listening to podcast on my drive in has actually been another time of just different ways to hear different things.
Yep, and I've got a commute, and it's one of the best things about it is just being able to get in some of that time.
I have a commute as well. Now, my problem is I listen to them at 2 times the speed because sometimes people talk entirely too slow for me.
Oh, I can't do it. I've
I can't do
tried.
it. So I'm like, 2 times the speed's great.
Oh, yeah, I can't do the 2 times. I feel like I'm just missing something, or it's just like
Yeah.
too much for me. But I
Well,
get it.
I'll try them at normal speed, and then I'm like, "You are too slow." So then I'm like, okay, I like bump it up until I get at a comfortable spot that I'm not missing anything, but I'm hearing
Sure,
everything.
that
And
makes
I can
sense.
never go faster than 2, but sometimes 1.5 is perfect. But it just
Makes
depends. I
sense.
try to stick to it.
If you could change or eliminate one thing, could be a modality, a common practice, a mindset, anything of your choosing in athletic training, what would it be?
Um, it's going to be the mindset side.
Sure.
Set boundaries and stick to them. Give yourself a 24-hour rule for practice changes or game changes. If they don't give you that 24 hours, you need the U time, and don't readjust your schedule for it. I know we all talk about this and saying we need to do this, and then we all fell through because we're all, for the most part, athletic trainers of we need to be there because we need to be there if something happens. Well, all your coaches are first aid CPR certified. You can't stop an injury from happening, and that's just part of the nature of the beast. And I was blessed enough at the school I was at that now, as much as they enjoyed having me and liked having me, they would always come back with, "Well, up until early or mid 2000s, we didn't even have an athletic trainer." So they're like, "We know how to," and this is, some of them like, "We know how to survive." So just, communicate that if, not counting weather for outdoor sports, obviously, but if it's not communicated to you and you already have plans, let them know.
I like it. Definitely necessary. Last question before we wrap up. What does being an athletic trainer mean to you?
It's more than just the providing medical care, but building the relationships and watching the athletes grow, especially coming from the secondary school setting. It's amazing how much they change and grow from freshmen to seniors. And then they sometimes also realize like what we as secondary athletic trainers meant to them when they move on to college and they go to, say, a JUCO, and the JUCO doesn't have a full time and they're just there for games and they're not there for practices. Or in the same aspect, they go to D1 and they have the athletic trainer there all the time with them. And they're like, well, why wasn't you here? And I'm like, well, look at the means that you have. You've got a staff of, how many to how many of you all? There was one of me for over 700 athletes.
Yeah, so, that gets lost, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, if people want to connect with you, follow you, reach out, what would be the best place for them to do so?
I'm on LinkedIn. I think it's Beth Shoulders. I check it on and off. Twitter or X at Beth_Shoulders. I think Instagram's the same thing. At Beth_Shoulders. Facebook. I'm on most of the social medias. Threads. I think I'm pretty generic on the at Beth_Shoulders.
Fair enough.
Shoulders. All of my pictures, you can at least see that it's me. There are a few other Beth Shoulders out there, but most apart, that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time. Glad we still got it scheduled, even though we had to work around that a little bit.
Hey, like I said, funny enough, it was because on my side, at least, that I picked up the PRN coverage opportunity the day that it was supposed to be originally scheduled. So,
it ultimately worked out good for all of us. So, looking forward to connecting with you again in the future. Best of luck as this PhD keeps going, along with balance and everything else you got going on. And thanks again for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Athletic Training Chat with Beth Shoulders, covering everything from the clinical side to the education side and how she ties it all together, and pretty much just everything she has going on. And so I really hope it was enlightening for you. We have a couple other episodes coming out in the future also touching on this, and really just the importance of making sure that all of us are covering the different aspects that the profession brings and not just siloing ourselves into what specifics that role we currently are in. So thank you again to Beth for sharing her insight when it comes to those. As always, thank you to Mueller Sports Medicine for powering this podcast and supporting it. He is everywhere. They're always coming up with something new and always coming up with the latest and greatest. So if you have ideas or questions, please reach out to them. If you're interested in the idea of journaling, please check out the Athletic Training Daily Journal. It is a journal that Rick Cox and I curated with quotes and passages we picked up from TED Talks and books, and ones that we found really impactful and tied to the questions specifically trying to relate it to athletic training to them to try to make it really hit home. You can check out a 14-day free sample at clinicalpress.org/shop or find the full book on Amazon as well. Thank you again for listening, and we'll catch you next episode.